displaying the glory of God's creation by exploring America one park at a time. Welcome to Parking Full Time with Big Dave, the park's professor. 10th hole. The par and distance are at the top of the screen. This hole plays directly up the hill, and it plays into the woods. It's a fairly tight hole. The line we're going to walk is the direct line between the tee and the basket. There is a slightly wider line out to the left, but either line you take is a pretty tight line. Considering the distance and the uphill and the tightness, this is a really hard hole. I want to welcome you back to Parking Full Time. I am Big Dave, the park's professor. We are at Athens Regional Park, and therefore we're in Athens, Tennessee, about halfway between Knoxville and Chattanooga, Tennessee. There's the 10th basket, and there's the view back downhill to the tee from behind the basket. The 11th hole is kind of the last of the heavily wooded holes. It plays uphill, but not as steeply uphill as the previous hole. This hole is a double dogleg, first to the left and then back to the right. The fairway is tight, but not as tight as some other holes, and therefore this hole is very birdieable with a couple of good and well-shaped throws. I need to say a word about the tees and baskets on this course. Every hole on this course has two tees. The back tee is marked with a sign with a gray pole, and the front tee is marked with a sign with a blue pole. Likewise, every hole on this course has two baskets. There's a yellow long basket and a red short basket. All of these video clips start at the back tee and go to the long basket, and therefore on this hole and every hole we will see the full distance of the hole. There's the view from behind the basket back to the tee. Hole number 12 is an interesting hole. It plays out of this chute of trees, and you're probably going to need a right to left disc flight to get out of these trees unless you try to go through a really tight gap. Now the problem with that is off to the left is some dense woods and the park boundary. So you have to be careful how much you curve your disc and also how far you throw your disc. Now the good news is if you can get out of the trees with your tee shot, then this hole really opens up and there are basically no other obstacles between you and the basket. So the optimal strategy on this hole is to just try to get out of the trees and get into position with your tee shot, and then you can break out the big arm and attack the basket with your second. This is a very interesting and very unusual hole. To finish my thought on the tees and the baskets on this course, the multiple tees and multiple baskets give this course high replayability and also high adaptability to your skill level. That is one of the strengths of this course. That's also the reason that I'm giving you the range of distances at the top of the screen on each of these holes. There's the view back to the tee. The 13th hole continues along the park boundary. It's a dead straight hole, but it's also a really tight hole. You can see these gaps between the trees here are pretty tight. This is a 500-foot hole, and it is a par 3, and so this is really tight for such a long hole, and because of the tightness and because of the length, this is a really hard hole. I captured this video on Thursday, March the 6th, and it was a pleasant afternoon with temperatures in the upper 50s when I came here. In spite of the weather, I was the only player on the disc golf course, although I did see a few other people in the park, walkers and people driving around the park roads and that sort of thing. We just passed a short basket to the right, and now we're coming into the long basket. This park has a really interesting mix of long and hard par 3s, and shorter and easier relative to par 4s, although some of the par 4s we're getting ready to see are not nearly as short as some of the ones we saw on the front nine. The 14th hole is the last of the park boundary holes. It's a gradual dogleg left with dense woods and the park boundary directly off to the left. But there's plenty of room off to the right, and there are no other obstacles between the tee and the basket, so if you just don't miss left, you should do fine on this hole. One of the weaknesses of this course is the large number of completely open holes, especially completely open longer holes on this course, and that is the only reason that I did not give this course 5 stars. I do really like this course, it just has too many wide open bomber holes for my liking. That said, this course also does have some holes that require accuracy, as we've seen earlier on the back 9, and also as we saw on the front 9. And so therefore there is some balance on this course. There are just too many long and wide open holes for me to give this course 5 stars. We're coming up to the basket, and as you can see, there's no trouble anywhere near the basket. So if you just keep it to the right of the woods, you should score well on this hole. There's the view from behind the basket back to the tee. The 15th hole is another fairly open hole. It starts out by playing steeply downhill, but it flattens out and actually plays slightly uphill when we get closer to the basket. Ideally, you want to keep your disc to the left of this row of trees that you see straight ahead, because the basket is to the left of that row of trees. However, off to the far left is some dense woods, and if you throw into the dense woods, that could very likely end up being a lost disc. So you're better off trying to poke your way through that row of trees than you are trying to find your disc in the dense woods. You can see that the gap between the row of trees and the dense woods is reasonably wide, and therefore a couple of well-executed throws should set up a birdie opportunity on this hole. In general, I don't like these more open and longer par 4s, but of the more open and longer par 4s here on the back 9, this one is probably my favorite. My 2 favorite holes on this course are the 3rd and the 5th holes. Of course, they're both on the front 9, and we saw the front 9 in the previous video. We're finally closing in on the basket now. Some of these par 4s are truly long and hard holes. There's the 15th basket. And there's the view back to the tee from behind the basket. The 16th hole is another really long and really open hole. You probably want to keep your disc to the right of this cluster of trees up ahead. That gives you the most room to work with and also gives you the most direct line to the basket. There are some undulations, some minor up and downs in this fairway, and also the fairway has a decently severe right to left cross slope. But really, the main issue with this hole is just its sheer length. I want to take the length of this hole as an opportunity to thank you for watching. Parking full time would not be anything without the people who watch. I realize that every day, and I heartily thank you every day. Also, as a reminder, I took a vow many years ago not to make any monetary compensation for anything that I do for this project, and I have kept to that vow. So the only thing I get for doing these videos and writing these course reviews are your likes, your subscribes, your views, and your comments, and I do appreciate all of those things. The long basket is finally coming into view now. There is a couple of trees and a single tree directly to the right of the basket, so I guess that's a little bit of strategy. I have a really weak arm, and therefore these long and really open holes, they just don't inspire me. I know some people like them, but they're not for me. There's a nice view off here to the west. Overall, this is a pretty scenic course. And there's the view back to the tee. Hole number 17 is yet another really long and mostly open hole. And once you see all of these really long and mostly open holes on the back 9, maybe you see why I don't give this course 5 stars now. This course does have a lot of good properties, but it's just not a 5-star course in my view. I just panned over to the right to show you the short tee on this hole. Now this hole does play as a slight dogleg right around this cluster of pine trees that you see up ahead here to the right. So you want to keep your disc close to that cluster of pine trees for the shortest distance around that dogleg. But this fairway does have a sharp right to left cross slope. So it's easy to have your disc roll down to the left and therefore make this long hole even longer. It's kind of a fun challenge to keep your disc as high up on the hill and therefore shorten the dogleg as much as possible. As we get around the dogleg, I just showed you the short basket, but we're going to walk all the way to the long basket, which is directly behind this solo tree. I went around this tree to the left. I I guess you could go around to the right, but it's a shorter and more natural disc flight, at least for me, to go around to the left. There's the basket on the 17th hole. And there's the view back to the tee from behind the basket. The 18th hole is the final hole on the course. The tee shot plays over the corner of this park road. I did see a couple of cars on that road, and therefore that definitely can be a safety hazard. We're going to jump over the road, and then we're going to head downhill around the dogleg right to get to the basket. It's probably best to go with a left to right disc flight on this tee shot, but that is dense woods down the entire right-hand side, so you don't want to overcut it. This fairway is kind of wedged in between the dense woods to the right and the park road downhill to the left. There's also this tight little tunnel created by this cedar tree, and so it's a real challenge to get through this tunnel and then get around the dogleg to get down to the basket. That's the short basket off to the left, and here comes the long basket up to the right. Overall, I do like this course. The only reason I don't give it 5 stars is all of the long and open par 4s, as I've already mentioned. But it's only a mile off of I-75 between Chattanooga and Knoxville, and so if you're in this area, it's definitely worth stopping here and playing around. That is the end of the course. Have a great afternoon, take care, and Lord bless.